Joining us today, Wendy Alexander, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. And she helps people who are midlife professionals and people trying to land their dream job. She originally is from South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa. And she was held at gunpoint at her first job, which is an interesting thing. She was a single mom trying to work through life as she could. And now she lives in Melbourne. So I'm very pleased to have Wendy Alexander on the podcast today. Wendy, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure. It's wonderful to be here, Matt.
So, how in the world is Melbourne, Australia this morning?
It is actually kind of grey today. We are heading into fall, autumn, and I know you guys are moving into spring, so it's interesting to be talking, to you from across the world. Um, yeah, so fall.
Yeah,
We don't like it. I prefer the summer.
for sure. Yeah, I think that's the stereotypical Australian person who lives in Australia, right? Is you have this idea that they love the summer, right? Yeah,
Yeah, we do. And we've had a very long summer. This is actually the longest summer we've had. So it
really
sort of began around very early December. Usually we only get our very warm days from after Christmas. But we were starting to see really warm days in early December already, and it's been consistently warm. It's been wonderful. I mean, because Melbourne's
interesting.
weather can go up and down, but it's been
Sure,
consistently warm, so loving it.
interesting. Absolutely. So, Wendy, take me back a little bit. Let's start this off, and we'll talk a little bit about your career and where you're at now. But you help individuals, kind of midlife individuals, transition to the
Mm,
next level in their career, or maybe change careers, right? And you help people all over the world do this. Wendy, but I want to go back before we jump into that. Let's establish a little bit of the pathos, ethos, and logos of this, right? What you came from South Africa, apartheid South Africa. Walk me through
yep.
that a little bit. Like what was life like for you in apartheid South Africa?
So my earliest memories were good memories because when you're a child, you don't know that you're growing up in a different or segregated or separatedness, as you mentioned before we got on the podcast, environment until it's pointed out to you. So I grew up I'm what they call Cape coloured. That's how I was classified. In South Africa, you were classified either black, coloured, or white, and you were set up in environments according to that classification. So the whites lived in certain neighborhoods, the coloreds lived in certain neighborhoods, and the blacks lived in certain neighborhoods. And you weren't allowed to cross over into the other neighborhoods. There was laws entrenched in the government that forbade that mixing of races, put it so to speak. So for example, if you met and fell in love with someone in another culture or another race, and you tried to marry them, that would be considered a breaking of the law, and people were jailed for that, right? So there was it was that severe. A lot like the civil rights movement in the South of America in the 60s, but this was kind of entrenched in the laws. But
Interesting.
I didn't know that as a child. Like, I'm growing up, I'm playing hopscotch, doing all the things that kids do. You don't know that you're in that environment. And the first time I discovered that I was in a segregated environment was one summer at the beach. So the family went to the beach. There was a sign, as there were at all beaches, whites only, blacks only, coloreds only, whatever. But the beach was a very remote beach and we didn't see any of the signs. So we went onto the beach, and probably within half an hour, I remember building a sandcastle with my brother, and then suddenly these black shoes was in my vision. And so, I'm a 7-year-old kid, and I trace my eyes up the black shoes and up, and I see police uniform, legs, and further up, and then there were two policemen on the beach. And they basically pointed out, what are you doing on this beach? They spoke to us in Afrikaans. It wasn't a speaking to us, it was a yelling at us. What are you doing on the beach? And I remember looking at my dad thinking, what's going on? Like, what's happening? Who are these people? Why are they saying these things to us? And all the adults did was pack up the picnic baskets, hurry the kids up, put us in the car, and drive off the beach. And as we were driving off the beach and rounding a corner, driving out of the parking lot, I saw the sign that said whites only. So, of course, I started harassing my father for answers because I was that kid. I was that curious, I need to know kid. So I was harassing my dad, and my father was like, "Can you just be silent? For once in your life, can you just be silent?" was what he said to me. And so I was quiet, but as soon as we got home and were in the safety of our home, I said to him, "What happened? Why did they throw us off the beach?" And then he explained to me and my siblings what the environment was, what apartheid meant, what it meant for our community, what it meant for the black community, what it meant for the white community, and that by law we had infringed on law in the country. And I remember getting super serious. Like it was almost like my childhood got wiped out in that moment, because after that I was looking for that in my life. I was looking,
Kind of like this innocence lost kind of thing, right?
innocence lost. That's how I felt. And I still, it's one of the regrets. I think if I don't have many regrets in my life, but I often think of that time and how serious I became. So this playful child was lost, and this adult in this child's body took hold. Because I remember being very serious, suddenly becoming super responsible, suddenly becoming very aware of my brothers and sisters and making sure that we were always safe and being on the lookout. And so that was kind of the environment that I grew up in.
Wendy, let me ask you a question real quick. So, because I'm here in the U.S. and you mentioned a term here just a few moments ago, and like you to maybe explain it if it's easy to explain. Cape colored? What is this?
So Cape Coloured means basically born in Cape Town, biracial child. So, or biracial human, meaning that there was a mixture of white and black. So yes, our ancestors had infringed on those laws. Many of those things were done in secret. You know how life is. The minute you forbid something, people want to want to participate. And so I had white grandparents and I had black grandparents. So I'm considered a biracial woman in South Africa. And the way they classified biracial people was coloured, and depending on your location, so in my case I was in Cape Town, so I was classified on my birth certificate as Cape Coloured.
Interesting. So you had
Yeah.
mentioned you had white grandparents, right?
Yeah.
Were you allowed to have contact with them, relationship with
Well,
them?
it's interesting. So my dad's mother was Scottish, so she was white, but I never knew her and my father didn't know her either because she died when he was 4 years old. So he grew up without a mother. He actually grew up in the orphanage because his father couldn't cope with the 5 children that was left behind when their mother died, and so they were put into the orphanage. So I knew of my heritage, but I didn't know my white grandmother at all. You know, she had long passed by the time I was born. And then I had my mother's mother was of mixed race, so she also had, so my great grandparents were white and black mix. And so it was just sort of filtered down, and this melting pot of bloodlines within our family that classified it. And if you meet some of my family, you know, some of them look like me, so I'm sort of like a caramel color. Others are darker, and others could literally pass for white. They have the light eyes, the blue eyes, whatever, and the very fair skin. And that was my family, blended family, melting pot of the family.
Interesting. That's and we talked a little bit about this before we came on air. It's shocking how little Americans like myself know about the apartheid in South Africa and how this worked, and even terms like Cape Colored, like you were just talking
Yeah,
about. This is the first time I'd ever heard of this, and I'm 43 years old and have visited to South Africa.
yeah,
And this is a brand new term for me because in America, if you say colored, right, we're thinking okay, well, you're just black. That's all there is. But in your
Mm.
world, growing up in Cape Town, there was actually three classifications.
Correct. Three classifications. So black was what they would call pure, so pure tribal black. Then there was my race, which was the mixture, the cross of the black and the white. And that happened. We all know it happened in the slavery movements. And we all know that it happened. And so you have that element of the people in society, and then you have the whites, which in South Africa was mostly Dutch. The colonizers came from
Sure.
Holland in South
Yeah.
Africa.
So
So,
let me kind of transition here a little bit. So you ended up from Cape Town, South Africa, to Melbourne, Australia, or to Australia. What took you there? How did you end up in Australia?
so Dad started to try to migrate to the country probably 10 years before. We tried for about 10 years to get out of the country, and the motivating thing for him was there was a lot of rioting starting to happen in South Africa during our childhood, and us kids were caught up in those riots. We'd be traveling on the buses to school. Next thing you know, there's flames going in the bus. My mother suffered from high blood pressure, and her blood pressure was through the roof because she didn't know if her kids were going to come home alive. We didn't know what was going to happen. You'd step out of your house, you'd travel to your school or whatever, but you didn't know what would happen because violence. By that stage, the black and coloured populations were starting to rise up against the white government. So there was this periodic times of violence, and it was severe violence, and they would send in the armed forces. There would be curfews. You'd have to be off the streets by certain times at night and things like that. So it was a safety element that was driving my father. He wanted a better life for his kids. He knew we weren't gonna. He was like, look, we're slightly better off than the black people, but not much. There's not a lot of opportunity. He told us that from young. You're going to have to work pretty hard, get really good grades, because otherwise you're not going to university. And he said, even if you want to go to university, you're going to have to get a scholarship because the family can't afford to send you. University fees were exorbitant back then. Still are. And so Dad had been trying for a number of years, and I think it was on the 12th or so attempt that we finally got the nod from Australia to migrate to the country. And I think we got it because at that stage my father's sister had travelled to Australia. She'd met an Australian and married an Australian. And then his other sister had migrated with her family to Australia. And so I think we got that last chance, we got in on reunion grounds, family reunion grounds.
Mm-hmm. Like
But
a
Dad had been
reunification
trying.
grant. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd been trying for a long time. So that's how we ended up in Australia after 10 years or so trying to leave the country.
Interesting. And to kind of pivot towards later in life here, once you got to Australia, Wendy, you became a single mom fairly early, right? Okay.
Yep.
Tell me about that. I remember I was watching some of your other interviews and listening to you talk to some folks, and you talk very vividly about this. Like this was a turning point in your life. I think one of the interviews you said you wanted to make like $20,000 extra a year. You know, tell
Yeah.
me about this. Was
So
this a turning point in your life?
yeah, absolutely. So single parenthood, obviously that's never the vision for anybody. When you're a teenager and you dream of love, you see the family unit, you see the white picket fence, the lovely house, all of that. And I had met my daughter's father when I was 22, and we were together for almost 10 years. The first 5 years was what I would call reasonable, decent relationship. The next 5 years or the next 4 years became violent. There was domestic violence in that relationship. There was also infidelity. And when I was 4 months pregnant, I discovered the infidelity, that he had been cheating. And so I walked out of the relationship, but he wasn't ready to let me go that easily. So another domestic violence situation ensued, and I ended up in hospital and almost lost the baby. And so I'm 4 months pregnant and I'm starting my life over again. At that stage, I had worked about 2 or 3 jobs to get a house. And then once we split up, the house went on the market, sold at a loss, and he walked away. He took no responsibility for his share of the debt, so the bank came after me, and I was pregnant with a baby. So when I came off maternity leave, as I was working my way through that maternity leave, all I could think about was, I need to make more money. I've got to pay this debt down, and I've got a baby to raise. And that became the motivating factor for me. And when I did my sums and did my Excel spreadsheets and my budget, I was like, I need to make $20,000 extra just to be able to pay the debt down and take care of my child. And so
you had said,
sorry?
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
So what I did was I started approaching recruiters and hiring people and asking them for help. Like, how do I increase my income was my question. So I would save the little money I had.
This was what I was going to get at next. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what little money I had left, I started to save and take these people out for coffee. I couldn't afford to take them out for lunches. That was beyond my budget at the time, but I could afford to buy them a cup of coffee. And so I would ask them for a coffee, and I started to ask questions like, how do I improve my prospects? Like, how do I rewrite my resume? How do I interview better? What are the things that I need to do to be able to increase my income? And everything they shared with me, I happen to love writing anyway. I had written all of my life through South Africa, through challenges. I've always written, journaled, written, typed, whatever, written short stories, poetry. So writing was like a natural skill. And I started jigging my resume and talking to these hiring people. They were giving me tips. I started to implement their tips and formed like a little system that I would run, practice with myself and then test the market. So I'd send out my resume. If I'd landed,
this led to a career, a 20-something year career in the corporate world,
23-year
right?
career in corporate. I ended up getting an opportunity. The first one I didn't get, and I was bitterly disappointed because I'd really applied all the strategies they gave me, but I got the interview, but I didn't get the job. And I went back to that particular interview. And here's something I like to encourage people, listeners. Don't always accept a no. If you can, find out how you can improve and maybe get a yes. And so I went back to the interview and I said, can you give me feedback on what I could do better? Like, I know I didn't get this job, but I want to grow, I want to improve. And they were kind enough to give me the feedback. You spoke too long on these questions, you waffled too much on that question, stuff like that they gave me. So I just kept practicing.
Real honest, genuine feedback.
Genuine feedback. Because I wasn't looking for someone to flatter my ego.
Be a yes man. To be a yes
man.
man.
Yeah, because you could never grow through that, right? You've got to get the honest feedback. And I said, tell me how I can get better. And I don't care how painful the feedback is, just tell me. And they did. And I applied it. And then about 5 weeks after that job that I didn't get, I got another interview. And this time I got the job. And
Wendy, that takes a very strong person to humble themselves, to say, give me that feedback, no matter how hard it is, how brutal it is, give it to me. That takes a strong person.
Strong, yes, I think there's an element of strength there, but there was also an element of desperation. I had a baby to feed.
Sure.
And sometimes your motivation can almost be a negative one, like desperation's a bit of a negative one, but it can also be fuel for the fire, right? When you need to step up. I was constantly looking towards this child, this infant lying in her crib and going, she has no one else but me to depend on. I'm it. I'm mommy, daddy, provider. That's it. And that was my reality. And it wasn't a reality that was easy to face. And it was a very lonely and very hard reality. There were many nights I cried myself to sleep and chastised myself for ending up in that situation. But I was like, you can sit here and you can cry for the rest of your life, or you can try and change this. These are your choices. And my father had said when we were very young, he always used to say to us, you can either be a victim of life or you can be victorious in life. You get to choose.
It's great advice.
you
It's
know,
such
and
great
I
advice.
I kept kind of being motivated by that, and I really wanted my daughter, I suppose because it was a girl as well. I was like, I don't want her to become a victim of life. I don't want her to be a victim of circumstance. So what does that mean? That means I'm the one that has to be the example to her. And that was really the motivation. It was the combination of desperation and wanting to be a role model to my daughter.
Let
That
me
is
ask
in
you
fact
this.
what drove me.
You had mentioned this, that this experience of being persistent, getting the honest, hard, brutal feedback, this led to finally landing a job.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yep,
was that job?
landing that job. So I landed up in as a contractor in a telecommunications company, driving the delivery of projects. So driving telco delivery projects, right? But what happened was the income jumped by 50 grand, and so I was
Oh,
like, whoa. I asked in my head it was 20. I'm getting 50. So what I did was pay that debt down super fast. Like, there was a lot of sacrifice. There was a lot of not going to the movies anymore, not going out for dinners. I was a new mother anyway. I didn't want to leave my baby with someone else, so I would be at home and just paying down debt. And I had learned how remedial massage. So I used to do clients in the evening when the baby was asleep. I'd have clients come to the home. I had a massage table set up. This was my second job. I was doing everything I could to get that debt paid off as much as possible. But in the meantime, I'd also landed this great opportunity in corporate. And one of the things I did do very early was when I had the interview, I negotiated. And here's another tip for the audience is like, sometimes you have to ask for what you want. So many people go through life just assuming that they're not going to get what they want. But you're never going to know unless you ask. You can assume and go, oh, well, the boss will never give me that chance, or this new company will never give me that particular environment to work in, or that particular perk, or that particular pay. But I just decided to ask. And what I did in my interviews was I would answer all their questions. At the end of the interview, I said to them, well, you know that I'm interviewing you as much as you interviewing me. I always led with that sentence. Somehow it broke down the barriers a bit. And it put me on an equal footing with the company. I would say, I'm interviewing you as much as you interviewing me, because here's what I need. I'm a single mom. My child is not even a year old. And I want to be a present mother to my child. So here's my request. My request is, can I come into the office 1 or 2 days a week, do all my meetings, gather all my information, motivate my team to deliver, and then I work the rest of the time from home, because I'm not prepared to put my child in full-time daycare.
and this was pre-COVID.
This was 28 years ago.
Long, so before
Long
remote
before it
work
was
was probably
fashionable.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
Long
long
before
before.
it was
Yeah.
fashionable. And you know what? But the thing is, here's the other side of requesting something like that, and that's what negotiation is all about, is that if you ask for something, you also have to give something. So I said to them, why don't we trial this for 3 months? See how I go delivering the work from home. If you're satisfied, and we have another meeting in 3 months' time. And the moment, and of course, that's a reasonable request, right? So the company was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's trial it for 3 months. And then I made the determination and the promise to deliver above and beyond. Because the only way you get to continue that type of situation is if you can prove to them that you can do it. And so I delivered my projects above and beyond. Many of my projects were brought in under budget. They were delivered ahead of schedule. Reason being was, look, I was fortunate. I had a baby who settled very early in life. At 6 weeks, she was sleeping through the night. I say God, the universe, whatever people
Yeah,
believe,
sure. Yeah.
was looking after me, gave me this independent baby who was down at 6 o'clock at night and didn't wake till 6 in the morning. So there was time at night where I could do a lot of extra work. And I delivered and delivered. And so by the time the 3 months came up, I had proven to them that I was reliable. And so they just go, we love the way this is going, you can continue. And that is how I negotiated every single job that I had from that moment on.
But
I
it
have
didn't
not,
stop there, did it? It didn't
no,
stop there. That
it
job led
didn't.
to a better job, to another
Better
job.
jobs, same, better jobs, better rates, better pay, and still the same circumstances. I literally worked two or 3 days in the office, the rest of the time at home, because I still wanted to be home for my daughter when she was going to school and things like that. And so I was able to do that. And that's why sometimes when I work with midlife women and they say that this can't be done, I go, no, 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 it can, because I did it and I know it can be done. But here's how we need to ask for it. And I help teach them how to ask for what they need and want.
And
That's
let
where
me
the
ask you this.
negotiation is very strong.
Let me ask you this, Wendy. So we've spent the past several minutes here establishing your credibility, your ethos, right? As a leader in this field, you've got the credibility here. You've got the story. You've got the experience. What do you do now? Like, you talk about helping women through the midlife kind of change and maybe moving forward in their career. I live in a very rural area
Mm.
of Texas where sometimes we call this thing brain drain. People leave and they never come back and they take their talents with them. Sometimes a lot of my audience are rural Americans who never have the opportunity to hear somebody like yourself. What do you tell them?
Well, look, I know sometimes people think that there's limitations depending on where we're located, and sometimes that can be true. So if you're living in the city, there's obviously a lot of opportunity. There's opportunity for you to go into companies, to go to in-person meetups and network with people that can open doors of opportunity for you. And so, yes, absolutely a lot easier in the city. And I'm a city girl. I'm in Melbourne City pretty much. Well, one of the suburbs, but not far from the city. But I've also helped people who are in rural areas in Singapore, for example, or in New Zealand, or in other parts of Asia. And where you start to leverage what is available now is to go to places like LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn, you can network with people from anywhere in the world, whether you're regional, whether you're city, rural, any of those parts of the world, right? But
Is
so many
LinkedIn still
people,
viable? Do you think LinkedIn's still
absolutely.
viable? Yeah.
LinkedIn has been for me what is generated, it still generates most of my clients because I put up content on LinkedIn every day. And it's all content around how I can help people. And it's all free. But it also draws people to me. So that's one way. But the other way is when I was building my LinkedIn profile and I was trying to network, because I was a mum that couldn't go out, like I wanted to be home most of the time, when the kid was asleep, I'd be on LinkedIn, connecting with people, looking at people's posts, giving them some love on their posts. If someone put up a post that I thought, wow, this is really interesting, this is really helpful, I would comment on it, or I would share it, I would like it. And this is how people build connection with people. LinkedIn also allows you to connect to people, and I say to people, even if you only connect to 5 new people a day, what LinkedIn does then is its algorithm starts to raise your profile. And before long, LinkedIn starts to suggest to you, these are the type of people you should be connecting to. They have similar interests. They've worked in similar industries. Their profiles are similar to you. They're interested in similar work. Some of them are key decision makers for big companies. So in the end, the whole LinkedIn system starts to work for you if you active on it. You need to be active on it. Nothing works for anybody unless there's certain action. And this is what I say. Success. I've seen success, whether I've had small or big wins in life. They've always come from me taking some action. Now, at times I haven't known what action to take, right? Like when I was first trying to get that extra 20 grand, I didn't know what to do, but I was like, who are the people that know what to do? The hiring people, the recruiters, they're the ones that make the decision about giving people better jobs. I need to go talk to them. So that was my first action, and it was a very uncomfortable action, but it was an action nonetheless. And I think this is where a lot of people miss the boat. They want a change, they want a health change, they want a financial change, they want a career change, but they do not take an action towards it.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
okay if you take the wrong action.
just
You will
taking
learn
action.
from, yeah, you will
Yeah.
learn from the wrong action, and you can then pivot and move into the right action. Sometimes you've got to take two or three wrong moves before you make the right move, right?
For
But if you're
sure.
not making any moves, you pretty much stuck. You become, and that's what I saw when I was crying, and I used to call it doona diving. I was diving under the doona, you know, putting the doona in, diving into my bed, pulling the doona over my head, and not wanting to face my reality. But I also knew I could only do that for a short period of time, because if I'd stayed there, my daughter and I were going to end up on the streets. We weren't going to be able to eat. And so in the end, it was like, okay, you're allowed to do a dive. You're allowed to feel your feelings and be upset and be confused and even be scared.
Do
But
these
then you have to do.
experiences, do these experiences that you've had, Wendy, throughout your life, do you think now that you're older, 20 years removed from this situation, do you think that they help you empathize or relate to the clients that you work with today? And if so, how so?
Well, I think, I suppose because I've walked the talk, I can talk from experience. I can talk from the moments that I was incredibly afraid and stuck and under the doona crying. I can talk from being incredibly confused and how did this happen? You know, I'd been in this relationship for 10 years and then I'm alone and I'm a single mother and that was not my dream, right? That was not my dream. Um, and so all life's disappointments had come at me. Um, and so that's what I share with people. When people come to me and they stuck, I share my story. I'm very open and honest about my story. You know, I don't hide it because I want to try and demonstrate to people that if I can do it and if I can overcome, and I can come from the background and the very many limitations on me, especially growing up in a place like South Africa, then anybody can do it.
You know,
You
that's one of
know?
the things that this podcast, when I started this podcast, Wendy, one of the things that I started this with was creating genuine, authentic connections because in an increasingly artificial world, I believe that being genuine and authentic is more important now than ever. And you're
Yes.
absolutely a real authentic person. And I'm so grateful to have this time to talk with you. But tell me a little bit about what you do today.
So today I still do the career coaching. So my business is around career coaching, help people get the jobs. But I have pivoted to work mostly with midlife women. And that was also motivated from my own personal story. So when I hit menopause, it came early for me. In my mind, it was supposed to come when I was in my 50s. I was 45 years old when menopause hit me, and it hit me hard. Every symptom known to womanhood, from hot flashes to insomnia, severe insomnia, night sweats, all of these things, body pain, it slammed me. And I was at the top of my corporate career at the time, earning big money, but huge, delivering hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects. And suddenly menopause comes and my brain is mush. I suffered from severe foggy brain, which is a big symptom for a lot of women. Not all women, but a lot of women suffer foggy brain. And suddenly the doubt kicked in. It was like I didn't feel competent anymore because I was forgetting things. I was doing reports and I'm like, did I put that in or did I put those numbers in? I was, you suddenly so confused. There was no help in corporate at the time. That conversation was not being had. I'm 58 now. Menopause came for me at 45. So this is, more than 10 years ago. No one's talking about it. There is no support in corporate for women in midlife.
And there's
Um,
not a lot of, there was probably 10, 12 years ago, there probably wasn't as
any.
many treatments or anything that you could do. I mean, medicine has come a long way in 12 years.
That's right. And also the conversation is now opening up. And so people are starting to talk about it and we I still think we're behind in the conversation. I think we need to be further along, but you know what? I'll take what we're doing now. At least we're talking about it. At least we're starting to put in support programs for women. But they didn't exist when I went through it.
Wendy, why do you think you bring up a good question? And obviously, I'm a guy, in my 40s, my wife going through premenopause right now, and she's pretty young, you know, and Why do you think this is such a taboo subject still today?
Well, I think it ties also into certain hard won rights for women as well, right? So some of the conversations has never, and also for a long time, most of corporate leadership was all men, and they've never had to worry about that. So if it's not something you have to worry about, you know, and I don't think there's necessarily a mean streak among men. It's just men don't have to worry about that. They might go through other, midlife crisis. They might want a Porsche and a Ferrari or whatever, right?
Yeah, sure.
But physically, they don't go through that estrogen drop that women go through, and the effects of that on a woman's body. So they don't understand. And if you try and raise the subject, it's not something they can relate to. So when people can't relate to something, it takes them a while to get the impact on someone else, right? It's the
Totally.
same with the
Yeah.
race relations conversation. If you're the person that's perpetrating the injustice, the racial injustice, you don't get the impact on the person until it happens to you. Most of
That
the time. That is
that's
just
wow.
human nature.
Yeah.
It's
That
just
is
human nature.
yeah, sure, sure. And so when you're coaching these women who are in midlife and going through these different changes like menopause, what do you tell them? Like, do you encourage them to go ahead and take the jump, even with all of these different things going on in their life, physiologically and physically? Do you tell them just say, "Hey, look, go for it"? You know, now's the time
No,
to
I
change.
don't actually. What I do with women is we work through what they love doing. We start looking into the patterns of their life. What is the things that's shown up all of your life that you absolutely love doing, that people come to you for advice for? Because this is where you're going to start digging out the skills and the real strengths. And we try to get to the heart of what would make them jump for joy going to the office every day. And sometimes they discover that it's not the job that they're in, that it's something that they've yearned to do for a lot of years, but they've put the children first, they've put the partner first, they've put their aging parents first, they've never thought about themselves. So that is some of it. But the other piece that is really important is that I don't encourage anybody, the male clients I work with and the female clients, do not jump from a job unless you've taken care of a certain level of financial support. Because if you jump too early and you don't have any financial savings or backing, you are going to put yourself under severe stress. Because you know what? The bills aren't going to stop. The mortgage has to get paid. If you're renting, the rent has to get paid. The kids' school fees has to get paid. The food bill has to get paid. The utilities bills have to be paid. And so if people jump too soon and they haven't secured something that they might love doing and they're under financial stress, when you then find an opportunity, that is the worst time to negotiate for what you want, because your whole energy doesn't match what you're asking for. The level of confidence that I've seen dented in people who are under financial stress, you cannot underestimate how important it is to plan out your exit. That's why with me, if people work with me, we go through a planning process. And I know it's hard because sometimes some people just want to jump. They're miserable, so they just want to jump. And I'm like, no, let's work out how we can get you the skills. So for sometimes you might want to change to an industry, but you don't necessarily have all the skills. Then we look at volunteering in organizations where you can gain those skills while you still have an income. So maybe you don't get to leave right now, but maybe you get to leave 12 months from now or 18 months from now.
Do you work with
Um,
clients one on one, Wendy, or do you?
I work, most of my clients is one-on-one, yes. So they normally come and chat to me over a 15-minute cup of coffee. I like to have virtual coffees with people and discuss with them the direction they want to go in. And then I give them various options. I often do a live resume assessment, so I can say, listen, your resume is really weak here. You want to go into this industry, but you haven't highlighted the skills that go to that industry. So I do that over a 15-minute cup of coffee, and then after that, I give them a various list of the different things that I do. Some people are very good at writing. They don't need my help writing their resumes, but they really stumble when it comes to interviews. So they only come to me for interview coaching. and we go through interview practices, how to structure answers, how to answer confidently and succinctly, because succinctly is the key. You
How
need to
long does
tell
this
someone.
process take, Wendy? How long does it
So
take? Is it different for everyone?
with interview coaching, most clients, I'm proud to say, get it after 3 sessions. So most people only buy a 3-session coaching package from me for interview practice. There's been 1 or 2 who've bought the 3 sessions, and then they go, you know what, I'm still a little nervous. Can I have another session? And they might buy another extra session or another 2. But most people get it in 5, because I'm quite structured in my practice with people. So that's the interview coaching. A lot of the women who come, they actually buy a 4 to 6 months package, because we're going to dig into a lot of things, and we're going to be building confidence, and we're going to be working out how we can gain skills that are missing in either a free way or in the cheapest possible way. Gain those skills that are missing. Volunteering is a great way. Here's another tip for people who volunteer. A lot of people underestimate that. What I've seen, and this has happened to me, and it's happened to a few of my clients, you don't know who you're going to run into when you go volunteer at an organization.
So true. Yeah.
And I used to volunteer for an organization throughout my corporate career who we used to collect excess food from food markets, and we would take it to the homeless shelters and we would cook it. I met numerous CEOs in that volunteer organization. And there was one CEO who came up to me one day and he said, I like the way you communicate. I've been observing you for the last few weeks, the way you communicate with people. He said, are you interested in coming to work for me? Now, I was not looking for a job, but he offered me an opportunity. I didn't take it because I was very happy where I was at the time. But this is what I'm saying to people. You don't know where the opportunity is going to come from. And sometimes you go to a volunteer organization just to give something back to the community, or because you want to learn some skills and gain some different skills. You could run into a key decision maker in that volunteering capacity and end up with a brilliant job. It's happened to loads of my clients. It's happened to me. And so there's another benefit of volunteering. It's not just about gaining skills. It's not just about giving back to the community. Sometimes you can run into your next job in a volunteering organization.
And
so
these volunteering are around things that you really enjoy doing.
That's right. Most people, we volunteer in spaces that mean something. For me, I was volunteering as a young kid in homeless shelters in Cape Town, because that was a bugbear for me. When I used to see homeless people on the street, it really affected me and it bothered me. And so I always wanted to be helping. And so when I came to Australia, I did similar. But through that pull towards helping the homeless, I met amazing people. I met people who had big companies, who were big key decision makers. And so you don't know what it's going to lead to. So find where your pull is. What is pulling you towards something? And go and volunteer there, because I'll bet you anything that you're going to run into an opportunity there. I've seen it happen time and time again.
Let me ask you this. How does somebody get in touch with you?
So my website is probably the best way to find me, happycareerhub.com.
I'll link that in the description of the podcast and the YouTube page.
Yep, and there's a free resource on there for helping you to dig into your story and dig into your skills to determine what will move you in the direction. There's also a resource for midlife women. And it's a bundle that I've put together for midlife women to get them started in the right direction if they're looking to, number 1, reduce their stress at work, and number 2, head in what I call their career 2.0, which is a career about doing what you love rather than doing what someone's told you to settle for, right?
Yep.
So
your website.
A few resources there at the website, and then my contact details are on the website as well.
Wendy, I want to close this interview with 3 short questions. And I ask these to almost everybody that comes on here. What are your 3 most important habits that are non-negotiable? The 3 traits you have that are absolutely non-negotiable.
Meditation, first thing in the morning. So when I wake up, quiet time with me and God, or me and the universe, so I do it for anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes. I stretch the body every morning, so that's all part of the morning routine, and then non-negotiable is time with my family. So I close off my last, whatever work I'm doing, whatever appointment I have, 4 o'clock is the last time I take an appointment. And if it's an hour an appointment, if we finish at 5, and then everything goes off. The computer gets shut down, the phone gets turned off, and it's family time.
Do you know
That's
how
my
often?
non-negotiables.
Do you know how often meditation and family time come up when I ask people this? And I've
Mm,
interviewed athletes, CEOs, all sorts of people, and meditation, quiet time, and family time. That comes up
mm.
every time. What is the most impactful moment of your life? What would it be?
The birth of my daughter, by far. Um, it was under very difficult circumstances, but I always, the moment I held her in my arms, I don't know, something, I knew I was going to do something different with my life. If only to be an example to this child. And then I
Mm,
call her my good luck charm. She was, the fact that I was carrying her and carrying her through very difficult circumstances, but she was always there, and I was driven to give her a better life. And that was the moment, the turning point. So the pregnancy and the birth of my daughter was the turning point, the motivation factor for me to really step up into my life and make a big difference.
that's powerful. And last question. If you could have a conversation with the 21-year-old Wendy Alexander, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that it got better than what it was at the time. Just to keep moving forward, and it did get better. And that life was going to be better than I had dreamed of, because at 2021 was when I migrated from South Africa to Australia. And stepping into a world that you know nothing about, even if it was a world you desired because apartheid was challenging and I wanted a new world, making the change was still very hard. And it always is hard to make change because you're stepping into the unknown. You don't know what you're going to find. And it took our family 2 years to adjust to the new life. And there were moments when I felt like going back to South Africa, back to the devil I knew. It was a devil, but
Mm,
it was something I knew. But just moved forward. And so at 21, I would say, continue to move forward, girl. It's going to get better.
it's going to get better. That's so powerful. Wendy Alexander, thank you so much. I know we went a little bit longer than the 30-minute. Golly, thank you. Really, thank you so much. There's so
Pleasure.
much good advice here, and I will link your website in the description. And I really wish you continued success and all the best. Really
Likewise.
fascinating.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Matt.
much.
Pleasure.
Thank
It's
you.
been wonderful chatting with you.
All right, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.